It was supposed to be just another panel appearance. Nothing unusual, nothing too tense. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett had done dozens of these live TV spots. She was known for her sharp thinking, unfiltered honesty, and her ability to stay composed even when pressed. That morning, she walked into the studio, knowing the segment would touch on immigration and national identity, two topics she had addressed plenty of times. But she had no idea that things were about to take a sharp, personal turn. The panel was made up of a mix of commentators, one liberal-leaning policy analyst, a Republican strategist, and a conservative media personality known more for his provocations than his insights. From the moment the show started, he seemed unusually animated, leaning into each question with a grin that hinted he was waiting for something. About 15 minutes into the discussion, the host pivoted to recent viral social media reactions. Two comments Crockett had made the day before. She had raised a point on another network one that called attention to the glaring inconsistencies in how America treats different immigrants. It was a fair and reasoned comment, backed by policy, facts, and historical context. But online, it had been twisted, misquoted, and blown up into something else entirely. The conservative panelist, clearly enjoying the moment, interrupted the discussion and leaned in with an air of smug confidence. You know, he said, turning to Crockett, there's this hashtag trending right now. Hashtag deport, that'd be asterisk. People are saying maybe you should be deported. What do you make of that? The room changed. There was a moment of complete stillness. Even the host seemed caught off guard, eyebrows raised, glancing off camera for direction. Crockett didn't flinch. Her body language didn't shift. She just slowly turned her eyes toward him. Calm, but steely. It was an ambush carefully planned, or maybe just a spur-of-a-moment attempt to score a sight. Either way, it wasn't professional debate. It was bait. The panelist wanted a reaction. He wanted Crockett to get angry, to fumble, to let emotion overtake her. But what he got was something entirely different. Jasmine Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't snap back. She sat up straighter, let a small smirk play at the corner of her mouth, and responded in a tone that was equal parts steady and loaded with intent. You know what's wild? She began. People think they're clever when they hide behind hashtags like that. I was born in Dallas, Texas. I grew up on American soil. My family's been here for generations. I've earned every degree, every position, every vote that's gotten me where I am. And I've done it by following the rules. And defending the Constitution's something you might want to try someday. The studio stayed silent, but she wasn't finished. But since we're talking deportation, she continued, turning the conversation without skipping a beat. Maybe we should ask why no one had that same energy for the woman who came here on a modeling visa, posed nude for foreign magazines, and somehow ended up in the White House as First Lady. I'm talking about Melania Trump. The tension cracked. The panelist leaned back in his chair. The other guests didn't speak. The host cleared his throat, clearly unsure how to redirect. But Crockett wasn't asking for permission. It's always fascinating to me how certain immigrants are held up as success stories, while others are treated like threats. We've got people who cross the border to escape violence, to work jobs most Americans won't touch, and they get caged like animals. But someone marries into money and power, and suddenly she's the face of dignity and grace. Spare me. The ambush had backfired. What was meant to be a moment of humiliation for Crockett became a turning point. In less than 2 minutes, she had exposed the hypocrisy beneath the conservative argument. She didn't need to yell. She didn't need to insult. She simply told the truth, clearly, bluntly, and with the facts on her side. Social media exploded. Within minutes, clips of the moment went viral. Commentators scrambled to spin it, but the damage or the revelation was done. Crockett had taken a targeted personal jab and turned it into a national spotlight on double standards. Jasmine Crockett didn't plan to bring up Melania Trump. She hadn't written any remarks targeting her. But when the conservative panelist tried to bait her on live television with a loaded comment about deportation, something clicked. It wasn't just a personal jab, it was symbolic. The panelist had introduced a trending hashtag deport, that'd be as if it were a legitimate point in political discourse. He wanted to reduce a serious conversation about immigration into a meme-worthy insult, and Jasmine wasn't about to let that slide. She leaned forward slightly, measured and intentional. Let's talk about deportation, since you brought it up, she began, her voice low and focused. I was born in Texas. My roots are here. I'm a product of this country. I've paid taxes, served my community, and now I serve in Congress. But somehow, I'm the one folks want to deport. The panelist smirked, clearly thinking he had struck a nerve. But he didn't realize Crockett was just getting started. You want to talk about who should be here and who shouldn't, she continued. Then let's really have that conversation. Let's talk about how Melania Trump came to this country, on a visa, posed nude for British and French magazines, and somehow got an Einstein visa meant for people with extraordinary ability, not scientists. Not Nobel laureates Melania Trump. Asterisk. That was when the tension in the room shifted. You could feel it. The host's face tightened. The other panelists froze in place. Everyone knew this wasn't just a clapback. It was a reframing of the entire immigration debate. Crockett wasn't slinging personal insults. She was forcing the audience to confront the contradictions that too often go unchallenged. Asterisk. She didn't raise her voice or break into theatrics. She simply laid out the facts and let them sit in the air. Asterisk. Let me be clear. She said, I don't have an issue with people coming to this country to build a better life. That's the American story. But what I do have a problem with is the hypocrisy. I see people demonized every single day, people who've risked everything to escape violence and poverty, while others are given a red carpet simply because they married into wealth or had the right look. Asterisk. At that point, the conservative panelist tried to cut in. He muttered something about respect and crossing lines, but Crockett didn't even look at him. Asterisk. Oh, now it's disrespectful, she said. Where was all this concern for civility when you brought up a disgusting hashtag meant to demean a sitting member of Congress? When I talk about facts, it's offensive. But when you call for my deportation, it's just political theater. Asterisk. The audience online was eating it up. Social media feeds began to flood with real-time reactions. People were pulling up old news articles about Melania's immigration story, her questionable visa process, and her family's eventual sponsorship. For years, critics had tiptoed around it. But Crockett, in that moment, ripped the band-aid off. Asterisk. She didn't call for Melania to be deported. She didn't stoop to the level of the panelist. Instead, she held up a mirror to America's double standards and asked, bluntly, why are some immigrants celebrated and others vilified? Asterisk. Let's be honest, she said. If Melania Trump's name was Maria Gonzalez and she came from El Salvador, working a hotel job instead of modeling for cameras, do you really think she'd be first lady? Or would she be caught in a raid and thrown in a detention center? Asterisk. The studio stayed quiet. Even the conservative panelists didn't have a comeback. The silence wasn't fear, it was discomfort. Because everyone in the room knew she wasn't wrong. Asterisk. Crockett turned to the camera and finished her thought like she was speaking directly to the American public. Asterisk. Immigration isn't the problem. Hypocrisy is. And until we're honest about how race, privilege, and money shape our perception of who belongs, we're just playing games with real people's lives. Asterisk. In a matter of minutes, she had dismantled an entire narrative that media figures had spent years building, not with emotion, but with clarity, not with insults, but with accountability. And as the segment ended, it was clear who had owned the moment and who had been left speechless. As the clip of Jasmine Crockett's response made its rounds across social media, a bigger conversation began to unfold, one that reached far beyond the original TV segment. What started as a conservative panelist's cheap shot during a live broadcast had spiraled into something he hadn't anticipated. A national reckoning with hypocrisy in the immigration debate. Crockett's words had hit a nerve, not just because of their directness, but because they exposed something that many Americans had long noticed but were too hesitant to say out loud. Asterisk. The panelist, known for his aggressive style and pointed jabs, clearly thought he was scoring an easy win. When he brought up the hashtag deport, that be asterisk, he expected Crockett to fumble, lash out, or shut down. Instead, she delivered a calm, unflinching indictment of a double standard that the political right had either ignored or defended for years, and that indictment opened the floodgates. Asterisk. People across the political spectrum began asking the same question. Why was Melania Trump, an immigrant herself, treated as an exception above scrutiny, beyond reproach, while others were vilified for simply trying to survive? Crockett hadn't just shifted the conversation, she had reframed it. Asterisk. By calling attention to Melania's relatively undocumented immigration journey, including her early modeling career and subsequent Einstein visa, Crockett forced the public to reconsider the narrative they had been fed. The same people who celebrated Melania's story as a testament to the American dream were often the ones calling for stricter immigration laws and punishing those without perfect paperwork. Asterisk. As the story grew, people online started resurfacing old articles and court filings. They re-examined how Melania had worked in the U.S. before her work visa was finalized, something that had been quietly buried during her husband's rise to power. And yet, while other immigrants were deported for far less, Melania was embraced, honored, and placed in a role that gave her global visibility. Asterisk. Crockett's response, framed in calm but unrelenting truth, triggered this revaluation. Even some mainstream outlets couldn't ignore the growing traction. Editorials appeared in newspapers across the country, asking whether the immigration system truly treated everyone equally or just made exceptions for those who were wealthy, white adjacent, or well-connected. Asterisk. The conservative panelist who had thrown out the hashtag found himself strangely silent in the days that followed. His followers tried to spin the moment as disrespectful to the former First Lady, but it didn't land the way they hoped. The internet had already moved. Not to outrage, but to scrutiny. The outrage belonged to those tired of the performative patriotism that excused certain immigrants while targeting others. Asterisk comment sections lit up with comparisons. People posted stories of friends or family members deported for paperwork issues. Others shared the long, expensive, and often painful journey of becoming a U.S. citizen. In contrast, Melania's story, largely vague, never fully accounted for, stood out as a symbol of selective privilege. And through it all, Jasmine Crockett didn't backpedal or soften her stance. In follow-up interviews, she made it clear, this wasn't about tearing down one person. It was about the broader narrative America tells itself about who gets to belong. And why? There's a version of the American dream that only works if you fit a certain mold, she said on one appearance. We pretend this system is fair, but it's not. We punish desperation and reward connection. We turn a blind eye when it suits us and wave the flag when it's convenient. The conservative panelist never acknowledged how his attempt to humiliate her had backfired. He didn't admit that his comment had elevated a real conversation. Instead, he tried to move on to the next controversy. But Crockett's moment had already entered the public consciousness. She had called out a truth that was impossible to unsee. America doesn't have a consistent standard. When it comes to immigration, it has a sliding scale, tilted by money, race, and relationships. And in naming that truth, she gave voice to millions of people who had felt it but didn't know how or when to say it. That live moment, born from an attempt to embarrass her, became a mirror for the nation. And what it reflected wasn't just about Crockett or Melania or the conservative panelist. It was about all of us and what kind of country we really want to be. In the days following Jasmine Crockett's viral TV moment, the conservative panelist who had first introduced the inflammatory hashtag DEPORT hashtag found himself grappling with a level of backlash he hadn't expected. What he likely saw as a provocative soundbite turned into a full-blown controversy. And it wasn't Crockett who came out bruised, it was him. Crocketts.com. Razor-sharp dismantling of the hypocrisy surrounding Melania Trump's immigration story had hit like a tidal wave. Instead of reacting with outrage or defensiveness, she turned the spotlight onto the very people who had created the double standard. While the panelist might have believed he was playing to his base, Crockett made sure his remark was exposed for what it was, not political commentary, but a deeply disrespectful and racially charged dig, masquerading as patriotism. As networks replayed the clip, headlines emerged, not about Crockett's tone, but about the insult itself. Pundits from all sides of the political spectrum weighed in. Some tried to shield the panelist, claiming he was simply quoting what was trending, but the timing, delivery, and smirk on his face said otherwise. This wasn't journalism or debate. It was an attack meant to shame and provoke. And he wasn't ready for what happened next. Journalists and viewers alike began digging into his own record. People revisited his past remarks, looking for patterns, and what they found was a string of similar tactics, using coded language, pushing hot-button phrases, and trying to spark outrage instead of offering policy ideas. Crockett's dignified response didn't just deflect his jab, it put a magnifying glass on his entire approach. More importantly, Crockett's response elevated the conversation beyond personal attacks. While he tried to make her the target of a trending insult, she used the opportunity to point out how women of color, especially those in positions of power, are constantly policed and questioned in ways others are not. The comparison she made to Melania Trump wasn't about tearing someone down. It was about making the American people confront the difference in how immigrant stories are received, depending on who's telling them. As the online firestorm intensified, something unexpected happened. Conservative commentators who usually rushed to defend their own grew quiet. Some even acknowledged that Crockett had made a fair point, and the panelist, he disappeared from the spotlight for a few days, declining interviews, skipping scheduled appearances, and avoiding questions. People began to notice. It was a rare shift. Someone who thrived on controversy, who built a platform on confrontation, was now nowhere to be found. And it wasn't because he'd been canceled or censored, it was because he had no real defense. The audience had watched the segment, heard the insult, and seen how masterfully Crockett turned it back on him without stooping to his level. Commentators noted how this moment served as a masterclass in rhetorical judo. Crockett had taken an intended slight and used it to reveal larger truths about gender, race, and immigration. Meanwhile, the man who initiated the whole exchange was left floundering. His silence wasn't strategy, it was the absence of a counterpoint. Even conservative audiences, though slower to respond, began to question why the conversation had gone the way it did. Some defended him reflexively, but others admitted that it was a bad look attacking a sitting congresswoman with a vulgar insult on live television, only to be out-argued with facts and grace. In the end, what he tried to frame as a clever moment of trolling became a cautionary tale. It showed how quickly public sentiment could turn when someone speaks with honesty and purpose, especially when facing down an obvious attempt to humiliate them. Crockett didn't just win the moment, She changed the tone of the conversation, and the panelists who tried to use her as a punchline ended up becoming one himself. Not because she mocked him, but because she revealed just how empty his provocation really was. As the dust settled from that explosive broadcast, one thing became clear. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just survived a smear attempt, she had owned it, dissected it, and turned it into a defining political moment. What was meant to demean her, instead gave her a platform to expose the contradictions embedded in America's immigration rhetoric, and to call out the selective outrage that often defines political discourse today. Asterisk, the conservative panelist, who once held court with quick jabs and viral insults, learned the hard way that substance still matters. His smug delivery of the hashtag DEPORT, that'd be asterisk meant to provoke a reaction, ended up revealing far more about him than it did about his intended target. Instead of sparking laughter or applause from his usual audience, he found himself faced with uncomfortable questions. Why weaponize a woman's race and nationality to undermine her voice? Why pretend it's a joke when the implications are rooted in something far deeper: xenophobia, misogyny, and fear of outspoken women of color and power? Asterisk, Crockett didn't flinch. She didn't fall into the trap. With poise, she flipped the script. She invited viewers to ask themselves why someone like her, born in the U.S., highly educated, professionally accomplished, is more often interrogated about her place in this country than someone like Melania Trump, who arrived under questionable circumstances, but was celebrated simply because of who she married. Crockett forced the nation to look itself in the mirror and confront the fact that belonging in America is too often determined by appearance, not contribution. Asterisk, in doing so, she tapped into a broader truth that resonated with millions of people across race, gender, and class lines. Her message was not just about immigration, it was about fairness. About who gets to write the rules and who gets punished for breaking them. About how politics should be rooted in values, not viral moments manufactured for outrage. Asterisk, the panelist never offered an apology. He didn't need to. The silence spoke for itself. His attempt to control the narrative had collapsed under the weight of its own cruelty. Crockett, meanwhile, emerged not just as a fierce defender of truth, but as a voice that refused to play by the old rules that too often silenced dissent in favor of soundbites. Asterisk. This wasn't just a political exchange, it was a cultural reset, a moment that proved intellect and integrity still carry weight, even in the era of clickbait and performative politics. Jasmine Crockett didn't win by shouting louder, she won by standing taller, speaking truth, and trusting that the audience would recognize the difference between